In this tutorial, I'll show you how to work with Illustrator files inside After Effects. So I'm going to use this multi-artboard artwork, which is based on a design created by Prometheus Studio from Tel Aviv. Please visit the link in the description to learn more about them. Anyway, these two pages are part of a commercial for a streamer that can record multiple channels at the same time. So this is why we are seeing two options for each style frame. Basically, you can TiVo both of them instead of fighting with your wife, which is of course the good wife, or maybe with the dangerous dragon. Totally up to you. Anyway, we are going to see if we can just bring those two artboards to After Effects and work with them using the same document. So I'll switch to After Effects and then I'll double click to bring the import dialog on screen. Here is the document that I just showed you with the two artboards. You can see if I'll click to the right here in the preview, I can see that indeed After Effects can recognize those two artboards. But let's see what happens if I'll click open. Now I happen to know that it doesn't matter if you are going to choose footage or composition, it's going to behave the same. So I'm just going to leave it as is and click OK. And we can see that as things stand now, we can only access the first artboard, which is this one. So we need to find a way how to separate the artboards to different documents, as well as also separate those layers. So I'll say goodbye to this version. I'll switch back to Illustrator. And first, let's just verify a few important things. The first one is the color mode. So I'll go to File and under Document Color Mode, I'll make sure that I'm using RGB color. The second thing is under Edit, Color Settings, and this is the working space. So you should change it to Rec 709 in case you are seeing something else. Usually the default is sRGB. And this is going to take care of the colors. So they are going to be the same here and inside After Effects. Now on my machine, this is already set up for me due to the fact that when I started creating those documents, I went to the File menu and under New, I started my work using a film and video preset. So this was the guy. And when you choose one of the film and video preset, everything is going to be set up for you automatically. But you need to be aware that these are the desired settings. Now, another thing worth calling out, if I'll switch to the Layers panel, is that I already separated the different elements to different layers. So After Effects will be able to access only the topmost hierarchy layers here. So in other words, when we are bringing this document into After Effects, this is what we are going to get. Now, Illustrator is very smart in terms of where those layers are, meaning that when I'll split it to two different documents, all the relevant layers are going to be included automatically with each one of those documents. So let me show you how this works. I'll go to File and I'll choose Save As. Over here, I'm just going to rename it something else. So let's delete the name and just add an underscore for now. We are going to rename these two files in a moment and then I'll click Save. Over here, I'll check Save each artboard to a separate file. Now, usually you don't need all because you already have a version with all of your artboard. So my recommended workflow is just set the range of the artboards that you want to separate. In my case, I'll take both of them, but you may have a document with more than a couple of artboards. So just set the range over here and then click OK. And that's it. Wait for a few moments and Illustrator is going to separate those two artboards to two different documents. Now, before we are going to import them to After Effects, I'll switch to a Finder window and I'll rename them because by default, you're going to get some weird naming. So I'll borrow the name Quattro from the main artboard and then I'll say this is going to be Quattro 01 and then I'll copy this thing and rename the second one to Quattro 02. And just to show you how they look, I can select both of them and I can open them here inside Illustrator. So I'll zoom out and you can see that only the relevant layers are included with this version of the document as well as over here. So now we can switch back to After Effects and we can import those Illustrator files and start animating them. So I'll double click and I can select the first one. Just make sure that this option is not switched on. Usually by default, when After Effects is seeing the same number, the same suffix, it thinks that this is an image sequence. So it may or may not switch this option on. You don't want it turned on. I will select the first one and then I'll click Open. And over here in this dialog box, I'll make sure to switch it to composition because I want After Effects to build the composition out of this document. And I'll make sure the footage dimensions are set to the layer size. You can also work with document size, which make less sense because in this case, each one of the layers is going to be cropped to its minimal dimensions. But as we can see, this is not the end of the line. So I want to show you what will happen. I'll click OK, and then I'll double click on the artwork to open it up, and it looks like everything is working. However, there are a few gotchas here. The main thing, if I select, let's say, this image of Tom Hardy and take him a little bit higher, we can see that we have some margin. So the layer, After Effects recognizes that the layer is continuing outside of the comp border. However, when we are bringing it like this, it will crop it to the first artboard dimensions. So this is something that you may want to avoid if you need access to those additional pixels outside of the artboard boundaries. I'll zoom out so you can see this is the case for all the other layers. Although we have this ghosting information, we can't actually see the pixels. Okay, so this is what we need to do. We need to select one of those layers, doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to just select this guy and then go to Edit and select Edit Original. You can also press Command E, Control E on the PC side, and this is going to open the document inside Illustrator. Now I'm going to zoom out by pressing Command minus and show you that here inside the Artboards panel, we only have one artboard. And this means that After Effects is not going to see anything beyond the border of this artboard. However, if we do want to include the extra data when we are bringing this to After Effects, we need to create another artboard. Now, this is very tricky. You need to do it in a specific way. Notice that we have a little plus over here. If I'll click on this, I'm going to create a new artboard, which is going to be placed near the original artboard, and it's also going to mimic the same dimensions, which doesn't help us at all. Also, if I'll switch to the artboard tool and I'll try to move this artboard, it's going to move whatever it sees on this artboard, meaning it's going to affect the design. So I'll undo a few times until I'll return to this point, and then I'll press Command 0, Control 0 on the Windows side, and then Command minus or Control minus to zoom out. The way to work here is to switch to the Artboard tool, and then you can just click and drag to create the second artboard manually. Now I'm just going to land over here, and the name doesn't matter. It can be any name you like. What's important is the order. So the first artboard, as you can see in the Artboards panel, is the one that After Effects is going to use to crop the image. The second one is the things which are outside. This is the bleed. And because we have two artboards, we can actually enjoy the extra information when we are going to bring it inside After Effects. Now, because we are working like this, we are going to see too many guides. And the way around this, and again, this is a bit of a hidden feature here inside Illustrator, is to make sure you are on the Artboard tool, then select whatever artboard you want to edit, and then click on the Artboard options. And over here, you can decide what you want to display and what not. So this is the only way to switch those green guides off. You might think that these are over here under View, Rulers, but they are not. So if you don't like to see the video guides or maybe the crosshairs over here, remember, you need to select each one of the artboards separately and then go to the artboard options, and you can decide what you want to see and what not. So I'm just going for this instance to switch off the center mark as well as the crosshairs. Click OK just to show you how this looks. All right, now I need to update this file. So I'll press Command S, and this is also going to update the file inside After Effects. So if I'll switch back And let's just zoom out so we can see again, we have a bit of a border outside of the comp. Now, if I'll move this, I can actually have access to all those pixels that I couldn't before. As a rehearsal, let's do it for the second document. So I'll bring back Illustrator to the front. I'll switch to Quattro 02 and I'll zoom out. I'll switch to the Artboard tool, which you can also get by pressing Shift O, by the way. And then I'll create a second artboard prior to importing this to After Effects. And then quickly, I'm just going to dismiss the default display of the guides. And I'll do it also for this guy. Why not? Again, the names of the artboard doesn't matter, but if you want, you can double click on them and you can rename it whatever you like. So I'll save this document and then I'll switch back to After Effects, and I want to show you another cool way. If you're more of a drag and drop person, then you can go to the After Effects settings. This is going to be under Edit Preferences on the Windows side, and check the import options. Over here, you can decide how you want After Effects to treat items that you are dragging and dropping into the project panel. So by default, it is set to footage, but I can actually switch it to composition, retain layer sizes. Now, this terminology is the Photoshop terminology. So this tells you that it will work for both Photoshop and Illustrator files, but it's going to do the same when I'll drag and drop an artwork or a .ai file. So let me show you what I mean. I'll click OK, and then I'll bring a Finder window on top of After Effects, and then I'll let go and select one of the files. And by the way, you can do it this way to multiple files, which is something that you can't do from the import dialog. Anyhow, I'll select this one, and I'll drag and drop it, and without any questions, After Effects is just going to treat it the same way. So I'll double click to check how this looks, and we can see that we have access to all the pixels outside of the cropping area, and we can use them here inside After Effects. All right, I'll press Shift and / to fit the viewer for both Quattro 02 as well as Quattro 01. Now, I also want to call your attention to the fact that by default, After Effects is using the last duration as well as frame rate from the previous comp. So this means that if you created a composition and the duration was set to 5 seconds, like in our case, and the frame rate was set to 25, the next time you're going to bring something from Illustrator or Photoshop, these are going to be set automatically for you. If you want to override them, then go ahead to the composition settings, and you can change your mind over here. I'm going to stick with 5 seconds. I just want you to understand how this works. Okay, so now I want you to notice this layer, Lines Up 1. If I'll switch it on and off here inside After Effects, this actually consists of few lines that I set up inside Illustrator. Now, if I want access to each and every one of those lines, so I can animate them individually here inside After Effects, then what I need to do is separate them inside Illustrator before I'll import the document into After Effects. So to show you how to work, I'll press Command E, and this is going to open up the file inside Illustrator. I'll zoom in by pressing Command+, and over here you can see this is the layer that I just showed you. If I'll click to select it and also twirl it down, you can see all of the different lines that we have here. I'll switch back to the Selection tool and show you that, of course, I can move everything in concert. But if I want to access each one of them individually, I need to take those different elements and drag them outside of this layer group. Now, in most cases, if I just select all of those lines and try to do this, we are going to get the No Can Do Ghostbusters icon telling us Illustrator can't separate groups or paths into layers. So what we need to do is create a layer from each one of these individual paths. And to do it, we'll need to click on this hamburger menu to select everything under this layer, and then go to the options in the Layers panel and select this command, Release to Layers Sequence. There's also Build, which works great with Adobe Animate, but since we want to create a composition, timeline, or sequence, this is the command that we want. So I'll select it, and you can see that now each one of those different paths is going to be a layer. And this means that I can select all of these layers and I can drag them outside of this lines group. And then this group becomes, of course, redundant. So I can trash it and maybe name each one of them. So I can call this one line 1, copy it, and just for the sake of time, I'm just going to name these in a numerical order. But of course, it's totally up to you how you want to call your layers. Now, because we already imported this document into After Effects, if I'll update the file by pressing Command S and return to After Effects, I'm going to get a missing footage dialog, which tells me that After Effects is expecting to see this layer and it can't find it. And my recommended workflow in this situation is to delete everything and start over. So make sure you are separating your files to the desired layers before you start to animate. So I'll select the Quattro 1 comp as well as the folder, then press delete to trash them and double click to import the file again. I'll click open, click OK, double click again, and now I can start to animate each one of them individually. Let me show you just one example. I can go to the effects and presets, open up the transition, double click on the linear wipe, and now I can wipe this line. So I'll create a keyframe for the transition completion here at the beginning, move forward to 10 frames, set it to 0, and then I can go to the beginning, select the linear wipe effect, copy it, select the other lines, then paste the same effect, and then I'll select all of those lines. I'll change the color so it will be easy for me to spot in the future, then press U to see the keyframes, and I can either start each one of them in a different timing or just drag the keyframes depending on what I want to create, but this is it. And now I can click on the layer group, select all the layers that have the same label, and then close them. Now let me show you one of the biggest advantages of working with vector layers inside After Effects, and this is also true for EPS and PDF files. I'll select the Tom Hardy image and I'll press S to show the scale, and then I'll start to scale it up. So you'll see that at some point we are going to see a pixelated version of this image. And to compensate for that, you'll need to click on the continuously rasterize switch. So by clicking on this sunshine icon, I'm telling After Effects to continue and rasterize this image regardless the size. And I can continue and scale this indefinitely, and After Effects is going to create a nice and crisp version of this vector art. Now, you need to be careful with this. If you really want such a big size, your best bet is to actually scale it inside Illustrator, and then in After Effects you can scale it a little bit above 100, maybe 300, 400, but not to this extreme. And the reason is that this is going to slow down your render. I also want to call your attention to the fact that if we're going to zoom in After Effects above a certain threshold, so let's press Command plus a few times to zoom in to 800%, we are going to see a pixelated version here. So this is a different behavior from the one that we are used to when we work with Illustrator files. Because again, After Effects is continually rasterizing this, but at the end of the day, this is a pixel-based application. Rest assured that at 100%, it's going to look amazing, nice and sharp. So you don't need to worry about the final render, but just take it under account. Okay, I'll undo a few times to return back to this point. And now let's talk about text. So both Mad Max and the Good Wife layers are live text inside Illustrator. Just to show you what I mean, I'll press Command E. This is going to bring back the Illustrator artwork on screen. And if I'll click on the word Mad or the word wife or any other text that we are seeing on screen, we can see that it is still indeed a live type. Switching back to After Effects, I'll show you that unfortunately, unlike Photoshop, if I right-click on a live text layer, I can't use the Create Convert to Editable Text option. Maybe this is going to be changed in the future. I know that Adobe knows about this limitation, but for now, we need to find a way around it. You do have the option to create shapes from vector layer, but since this is a text layer, if I'll select this option, After Effects is going to throw an error telling me that it could not create outlines because this is still a live font. So one way to work is, of course, return to Illustrator and then create outlines out of this. And then this is going to work. It will convert it to a vector layer. And very soon I will show you a script that can do everything for you automatically. But for now, I'll switch back to Illustrator just again to show you what I mean. I can right click and choose Create Outlines. And this means that this is no longer a live text and I can convert it to vectors inside After Effects. But if I want to edit this, I need to retype the entire thing again. So I don't want to work like this. I'll undo. Instead, what I'll do is I'll select the text and you need to do it title by title. So you can't select everything. I'll start with the word "the good," copy it to the clipboard, bring back After Effects to the front, make sure nothing is selected. I'll just click outside and then I'll double click on the horizontal type tool to create an empty text layer in the middle of the screen. And finally, I'll press Command V. So this is the correct order that you need to work with. You'll need to copy it from Illustrator. Let's do it again. I'll select the word wife, press Command C, Control C on the Windows side, bring back After Effects to the front, make sure nothing is selected, very important, then double click on the text tool and paste the text. And now I have two live text layers that I can place over the original one and work with them over here. Maybe I will animate them in the future. We will see. But before going this route, you can obviously see that the design is different. And this is because in Illustrator, I actually pressed E when the text was selected and used the free transform tool to distort those letters. And this is something that is not surviving when we copy and paste text from Illustrator to After Effects. So you can see that we have the font, the weight, all the typographic treatment that I've created for this, but unfortunately the distortion is something that we'll need to recreate over here. But the good news is this is very easy to do. I'll go to the effects and presets, I'll type the word transform, or at least start to type it, and I'll take the transform effect, apply it to the layer over here, and I can use this skew to compensate and create more or less the same look and feel. So something like this, -8. I'll copy the transform effect and paste it on the word wife, and then select it in the timeline. And using my cursor keys, I'm just going to place it where it needs to be. And then, of course, I can switch off the visibility of this layer, bring those two layers above the original one, so I'm keeping the same design. So Tom Hardy's head is still obscuring them. And of course, from this point onward, I can animate the live text, which is why I did it in the first place. So again, just to illustrate how this works, I'll return to the effects and presets, clear my search, start to type the word scale in, and let's use this one, scale in from point, double clicking on it to apply the preset. And I'll press spacebar to show you how this works. Now I know what you are thinking. There must be an easier way to work between those two applications. And you are definitely correct. If you haven't heard about this extension, let me introduce you to Overlord. So Overlord is a paid extension that was developed by BattleX. You can find it here inside After Effects under the Window menu, Extensions, Overlord, assuming you have access to it. And the same panel is also available inside Illustrator. So on my machine, it is already over here. You can find it again under Window, Extensions, same deal. This panel will allow us to send everything from Illustrator to After Effects, and there are a few options how we want to send these files. First, I'll make sure nothing is selected over here. And then I'll switch back to After Effects and I will create a new comp for it. This is just a temporary comp. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. This is just to show you what you can do. So switch back to Illustrator. I'll select everything by pressing Command A, and I'll click on Push Selection to After Effects. And this is going to bring After Effects back to the front, and slowly but surely we'll start to build the comp for us, but everything is going to be converted automatically to shape layers inside After Effects. Now, because I'm sending very complex shapes, it will take some time to do this. So I'm not speeding up the process. You can actually see it in real time while I talk through this, and this is it. Now, you can start working with this. Immediately, you can see that the text automatically was converted to live text. Again, with the same limitation, so we'll need to compensate for the same distortion. But my recommended workflow is not to just push everything to After Effects, because when we are working with detailed shapes, it's just going to take a lot of time for After Effects to render them. So you can see I can move this, but I'm not going to get the same performance. And to be honest, I don't think that I need access to all of these shapes. So my recommended workflow, and this is why I told you that this is a temporary comp, I'll close this comp. The good news is that nothing has been added to the project panel. So these are all native text and shape layers. I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to close it, and then I'll decide what I want to send to After Effects for animation. So I'll switch back to Illustrator, and then I'll deselect everything by pressing Command-Shift-A, and I'll click on the layers that I want to send. So maybe the background and the lines over here. So I'll select all of these, and of course the text layers. So I'm Command-clicking, and if I want also the Prometheus logo as well. I'm not going to send the Giuliano Margolis and Tom Hardy images. I'll click now Push Selection to After Effects, and now I have everything that I need. So I can take the Tom Hardy layer and just drag it where it needs to be, I guess above the Mad Max title. I'll do the same for the Giuliano Margolis layer, and now you can see that everything is going to be much more snappier, so I can easily animate those layers. I only brought the things that I need. Just to show you how to use this, I'll select the pink one layer, and from the add options, I'll add the trim path operator, and this means that I can now animate those lines individually over here without worrying about converting them to layers ahead of time. So this is my preferred workflow. I'll switch back to Illustrator because I do want to call your attention to another very useful option. And this is again just scratching the surface of what the Overlord extension can do for you. So make sure to watch the tutorials over at battlex.co. But I'll select this folder with all of the swatches, and I'll click on the swatches icon. And this is going to create a swatches layer. Here in After Effects, it's automatically being set to a guide layer, so it doesn't render, but I can use those colors to continue and sample from them when I'm animating or maybe adding stuff to this design. Now, the Overlord panel doesn't need to be open here in After Effects if you're just sending stuff from Illustrator to After Effects. But you can do the opposite. You can select things from After Effects and you can push them the same way to Illustrator. So make sure to check this extension. It's almost like an air condition. Once you have it, you can't live without it. So to sum it up, I'll import the final version that I created for these illustrations. I'll open up Quattro 1 and Quattro 2 and go to the beginning. Here I have few shape layer explosions and some swivel lines that I've added on top of this. These animations were created with the exact same workflow that I just showed you. Very similar effect. Let me show you the first one. And of course, this is the second one. So I'll maximize it and preview the comp. And this is it. I hope that now you have a better idea of how to work with Illustrator vector artwork inside After Effects and to get the most out of them. Make sure to watch the other videos in this series to learn more about other Adobe applications and how they integrate with After Effects. Thank you so much for sticking until the end, and I will see you again next time.